Chapter 5. True families create true people. As a peace-loving global citizen. My wife, Hak Jahan Moon. Chapter 5, Part 1. The first time I saw my wife, she was a young girl of 14 and had just graduated from elementary school. She was a quiet girl who never raised her voice and never sought to bring attention to herself. She always took the same route to and from the church. When she was first introduced to me, I was told she was the daughter of one of our church members, Mrs. Soon A. Hong. "What is your name?" I asked her. "My name is Hak Jahan," she answered with a clear voice. In that moment, before I knew what was happening, I said, "So Hak Jahan has been born in Korea." I said this 3 times in repetition, and then prayed, saying, "God, thank you for sending to Korea such a wonderful woman as Hak Jahan." I then looked at her, and said, "Hak Jahan, I'm afraid you are going to have to do a lot of sacrificing." All of these words came out of my mouth spontaneously. Later, Mrs. Hong told me that she thought it strange that I would say the same thing 3 times after meeting her daughter for the first time. My wife has told me that she also remembers that first, short meeting. She told me she remembers everything that I said then as if I had delivered a sermon just for her, and she kept it in her heart. She said she felt like she had received an important revelation about her future that she could not forget. Her mother was from a faithful Presbyterian family, so she was raised in a Christian home. Her hometown was Yeongju, which is my hometown as well, but she had lived in Onju until coming to South Korea during the Korean War. When Mrs. Hong first began attending our church, she lived a very faithful life in Chuncheon and raised her daughter strictly. My wife attended a nursing school that was operated by the Catholic Church. I am told that the rules of this school were so strict that it was as if she were living in a convent. She had a gentle character, and during the time she was raised by her mother, she never went anywhere except to school and to our church. I was 40 at the time, and I sensed that the time had come for me to marry. All I needed to do was wait for God to tell me, "The time has come, so get married," and I would do as I was told. Sung Do-ji, an elderly woman in our church, began an effort in October 1959 to prepare for my engagement, even though there was still no bride-to-be. Another church member who had been praying for 7 years about a wife for me told me one day that she had had a dream in which she saw that Hak Jahan was my wife. Another church member, Mrs. G, told me about a strange dream she had. "What kind of dream is this?" she exclaimed. "I saw hundreds of cranes come flying. I tried to wave them away with my arms, but they kept coming and they finally covered you with their white feathers. Is this some kind of omen for the future?" The Hak in Hak Jahan is the Chinese character for crane. Then, Hak Jahan had a dream in which I appeared and told her, "The day is near, so make preparations." My wife later told me that in her dream she said to me in a humble tone, "I have been living until now in accordance with the will of God. In the future, as well, I will follow God's will as His servant, no matter what that will may be." A few days after my bride-to-be had this dream, I asked Mrs. Hong to bring her daughter to me. This was our first meeting since I had been introduced to her at age 14. That day, I asked this young lady many questions. In every case, she responded with composure and spoke clearly. In this meeting, I asked my wife to draw a picture. Without hesitation, she picked up a pencil and started drawing on a sheet of paper. When she had finished and placed her picture before me, I was very impressed by what I saw. I then looked at her face, and her shy expression was very beautiful. Her heart was as wonderful as the picture she had drawn. We were engaged on March 27, 1960, and had our marriage ceremony barely 2 weeks later, on April 11th. I did not set a date at the time, but when I called Miss Han several days later, I told her, "Tomorrow morning, we will have a marriage ceremony." She responded simply, "Is that so?" and did not ask any questions or try to speak in opposition. She seemed incapable of opposition. That was how pure and gentle she was. Then as now, when it comes to the will of God, she has a strong determination. I wore a samo kwande, the formal dress of court officials now commonly used in traditional wedding ceremonies, and she wore traditional Korean attire that included a jakdori bridal tiara. My bride, who was 17 and more than 20 years younger than I, looked confident and radiant with her tightly closed lips and pretty face. During the ceremony, I told my bride that she was about to embark on a difficult course. I think you are already aware that marrying me will not be like any other marriage. We are becoming husband and wife to complete the mission given to us by God to become true parents, and not to pursue the happiness of two individuals, as is the case with other people in this world. God wants to bring about the kingdom of heaven on the earth through a true family. You and I will travel a difficult path to become true parents who will open the gates to the kingdom of heaven for others. It is a path that no one else in history has traveled, so even I don't know all that it will involve. During the next 7 years, you will experience many things that will be difficult to endure. Don't forget, even for a moment, that the life we live is different from others. Don't do anything, no matter how trivial, without first discussing it with me, and obey everything I tell you. She responded, "My heart is already set. Please do not worry." I could see in her expression that she had made a strong determination. Her difficult challenges began the day after our marriage. The first difficulty she faced was that she could not see her mother. My wife, her mother, and her maternal grandmother were all only daughters. As a result, the relationship between mother and daughter was particularly strong. In order to take on her public mission and develop the proper focus, I asked her to live what amounted to an ascetic life for 3 years. That meant she could not see her mother or any of her relatives for 3 years. She lived in a room rented from a church member. She came to the church no more than once a day, usually in the evening. So as not to create disruption, she left through the back door. I was often involved in worship services or praying through the night and was rarely at home, but the separation was not for practical reasons. The separation was to establish a spiritual condition of unconditional devotion to her mission. As the outrageous rumors about me continued to circulate, this separation from her relatives and me made it even more difficult for my young wife to endure. At the time of our marriage, the Unification Church already had been established in 120 communities around Korea. Even in our church, however, there were those who were critical of our marriage. Some envied her, some hated her, and many stories circulated. As if that were not enough, she lived in someone else's home. Older women of our church followed me everywhere I went. Eventually, my seemingly cold treatment of my wife brought an end to all the criticism and envy against her. In fact, people began to sympathize with her. For example, many members criticized me when I couldn't go to see my wife even though she was suffering postpartum illness and was shivering in an unheated room after the birth of our first daughter. Some of them said, "How can he even call himself her husband? You're going too far, sir," I was told. "If you married her, you should live with her. What are you doing, making it difficult for her even to see your face?" The people who had been criticizing my wife one by one began to take her side instead. In spite of her young age, it was necessary that my wife receive harsh training. During the time we lived together, her environment was relentless. She never had even a single free moment for herself. She constantly was on edge, as if she were walking on a thin layer of ice, wondering, will today be peaceful? Will tomorrow be peaceful? Because she had to attain God's standard of motherly love, I corrected her for even a single wrong word. Sometimes even her affection for me had to be curtailed for the sake of her eternal mission. It was all necessary for her to become true mother, but I am sure it caused much grief in her heart. I might say a word in passing and not think much of it. She, however, had to harmonize herself with my every word, so I am sure her suffering was great. It took us 7 years to conform ourselves to each other. I relate these things because the most important thing in a marriage relationship is trust. It is what makes it possible for two people to become as one. As a peace-loving global citizen. An incomparable inner beauty. Chapter 5, Part 2. My wife and I made a promise to each other after we were married. We agreed that no matter how upset or angry one of us might become, we would not allow anyone to think, "It looks like Reverend and Mrs. Moon had a fight." We agreed that no matter how many children we might have, we would not let them see any sign that we might have had a fight. Children are God. Children are God with very small hearts. So when a child says, "Mom," and calls, you must always answer, "What is it?" with a smile. After going through such a harsh course for 7 years, my wife became a wonderful mother. All the gossip about her disappeared, and a peaceful happiness came to our family. My wife gave birth to 14 children, and she has embraced each one with so much love. When she is away from home on our speaking tours and mission life, she sends letters and postcards to our children every day. While it was difficult for her to raise 14 children over the course of over 40 years, she never complained. Several times I had to be overseas when my wife was about to give birth. She had to bear such times alone. There were days when I could not do anything for her. Once a member wrote me about her difficult financial situation. There was concern over whether she was getting sufficient nutrition. Even then, my wife never complained about her difficulty. Because I sleep only 2 or 3 hours a night, she has dutifully done the same throughout our life together. These sorts of matters pain me to this day. My wife has such a tremendous heart of love and care that she even gave her wedding ring to someone in need. When she sees someone in need of clothes, she buys that person clothes. When she comes across someone hungry, she buys the person a meal. There have been many times when we have received presents from others that she would give away to someone else without even opening them. Once we were touring the Netherlands and had a chance to visit a factory that processed diamonds. Wanting to express my heart of regret toward my wife for all her sacrifices, I bought her a diamond ring. I didn't have much money, so I couldn't buy her a large one. I picked out one I liked and presented it to her. Later, she even gave away that ring. When I saw the ring wasn't on her finger, I asked her, "Where did the ring go?" She answered, "You know by now I can't keep something like that when someone has a greater need." Once I saw her pulling out a large wrapping cloth, and she was working quietly to pack some clothes. "What are you going to do with those clothes?" I asked her. "I have a use for them," she said. She filled several wrapping cloths with clothes without telling me what she planned to do with them. When she was finished, she told me she was getting ready to send the clothes to our missionaries working in foreign countries. "This one's for Mongolia, this one's for Africa, and this one's for Paraguay," she said. She had a slightly self-conscious smile that made her look so sweet when she told me. Still today, she takes it upon herself to look after our overseas missionaries. My wife established the International Relief and Friendship Foundation in 1979. It has done service projects in numerous countries, such as Zaire, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. The foundation gives food to impoverished children, medicine to those who are sick, and clothing to those in need. In Korea, she created the Aewon charity organization in 1994. Its activities include managing a canteen serving free food to the poor and supporting low-wage earners, the handicapped, children taking care of families in place of parents, and others. It also provides aid to the North Korean people. My wife has also been active in women's organizations for some time. The Women's Federation for World Peace, which she established in 1992, has branches in some 80 countries and is in general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations as a non-governmental organization. Throughout history, women have been persecuted, but I predict this will change. The coming world will be one of reconciliation and peace based on women's maternal character, love, and sociability. The time is coming when the power of women will save the world. Unfortunately today, many women's organizations apparently believe that standing in opposition to men is the way to demonstrate the power of women. The result is an environment of competition and conflict. The women's organizations my wife leads, on the other hand, seek to bring about peace on the principle that women should work together, take initiative, and empower one another across traditional lines of race, culture, and religion to create healthy families as the cornerstone of the culture of peace. The organizations she works with do not call for a liberation of women from men and families. Instead, they call for women to develop and maintain families filled with love. My wife's dream is to see all women raised as true daughters with filial hearts who can create peace at home, in our communities, in our nations, and in the world. The women's movement being carried out by my wife serves the goal of true families, which are the root of peace in all areas of life. During one of the most intense periods of my public work, our children had to live close to half the year without their parents. In our absence, they lived in our home, cared for by church members. Our home was always filled with church members. Every meal in our home had guests at the table, guests who always received priority over our children. Because of this environment, our children grew up with a sense of loneliness that is not experienced by children in other families. Even worse was the suffering they had to endure because of their father. Wherever they went, they were singled out as sons and daughters of the cult leader Sun Myung Moon. This suffering sent them through periods of wandering and rebellion, but they have always returned home. We were not able to support them properly as parents, but 5 have graduated from Harvard University. I could not be more grateful for their courageous accomplishments. Now they are old enough to help me in my work, but even to this day, I am the strict father. I still teach them to become people who do more than I do to serve heaven and live for the sake of humanity. My wife is a woman of incredible strength, but the death of our second son, Hong Jin, was difficult for her. It happened in December 1983. She was with me in Gwangju, Korea, participating in a victory over communism rally. We received an international phone call that Hong Jin had been in a traffic accident and had been transported to a hospital. We boarded a flight the next day and went directly to New York, but Hong Jin was lying unconscious on the hospital bed. A truck traveling over the speed limit as it came down a hill tried to brake and swerved into the opposite lane, where Hong Jin was driving. 2 of his best friends were in the car with him at the time. Hong Jin cut the wheel to the right so the driver's side took most of the impact from the truck. By doing so, he saved the lives of his 2 friends. I went to the place near our home where the accident had occurred, and the black tire marks veering off to the right were still visible. Hong Jin finally went to the heavenly world in the early morning of January 2nd. He had turned 17 just a month before. Words cannot describe my wife's sorrow when she had to send a child she had raised with love to the heavenly world before her. She could not cry, however. In fact, it was important that she not shed any tears. We are people who know the world of the eternal spirit. A person's spirit does not disappear like so much dust, just because the physical life is lost. The soul ascends to the world of spirit. As parents, the pain of knowing that we would never be able to see or touch our beloved child in this world was almost unbearable. My wife could not cry, she could only lovingly put her hands on the hearse that carried Hong Jin's body. Shortly before the accident, Hong Jin had been betrothed to Hoon Suk Pak, who was studying ballet. I had to speak to Hoon Suk about his departure from this world and what she wanted to do. I told her I knew it wouldn't be easy or fair to her parents if she chose to live alone. I told her it was best to forget the betrothal had ever happened. Hoon Suk was adamant, however. I am aware of the existence of the spirit world, she said. Please let me spend my life with Hong Jin. In the end, Hoon Suk became our daughter-in-law 50 days after Hong Jin's departure. My wife and I will never forget the way she smiled brightly as she held a portrait photo of Hong Jin throughout the spiritual marriage ceremony. It would seem that my wife would be devastated each time she faced such difficult situations, but she always remained unshaken. Even in the most difficult and unbearable circumstances, my wife never lost her serene smile. She always crossed over life's most difficult peaks successfully. When church members ask my wife's advice on raising their own children, she tells them, "Be patient and wait. The period when children wander is only temporary. No matter what they do, embrace them, love them, and wait for them. Children will always return to the love of their parents." I have never raised my voice toward my wife. This is not because of my character, but because my wife has never given me cause to do so. Throughout our life together, she has labored to care for me with complete, loving devotion. She is even the one to care for my hair. So this great saint of world affairs is also the best barber in the world. Now that I am old, I make many new demands on her, and she always responds. If I ask her to cut my toenails, she will do it cheerfully. My toenails are mine, but I can't see them very well. She sees them perfectly well, though. It's a strange thing. The older I become, the more precious my wife is to me. As a peace-loving global citizen. Promises that must never be broken. Chapter 5, Part 3. During our matching and marriage ceremonies, I asked the brides and grooms to make promises to each other that must never be broken. First, a husband and wife must always trust and love each other. Second, they must not cause any pain to the heart of their partner. Third, they must educate their children and grandchildren to maintain sexual purity. Fourth, all members of their family must help and encourage each other so that they become a true ideal family. Chastity before marriage and fidelity in marriage are of utmost importance. This is what I teach so people can live to their highest potential as human beings, creating and maintaining healthy families. Marriage is more than a simple coming together of a man and woman. It is a precious ceremony of commitment to carry on God's work of creation. Marriage is the path by which a man and woman become as one, create new life, and establish true love. Through marriage, a new future is created, societies are formed, nations are built. God's world of peace is realized with married families at the center. It is in the family that God's kingdom of heaven is brought about. So husbands and wives must be centers of peace. Not only must there be love between the husband and wife, but the couple must also be able to bring harmony to their extended families. It is not enough that the husband and wife live well together in love. All the relatives must love each other as well. I tell brides and grooms to have many children. To bear many children and raise them is God's blessing. It is unthinkable that human beings apply their own standard of judgment and arbitrarily abort precious lives given to them by God. All life born into this world embodies God's will. All life is noble and precious, so it must be cared for and protected. Naturally, a married husband and wife must maintain mutual trust and nurture their love. The promise I emphasize the most to people preparing to marry is teach your children to maintain sexual purity. This is an obvious promise, but it has become difficult to keep in today's society. The worse the world becomes, however, the more important it is to strictly keep the promise of sexual purity. The perfection of human beings and peace in the world come about through the family. The purpose of religion is for everyone to become people of goodness who can then bring about an ideal world of peace. No matter how much politicians may put their heads together, they will not bring about peace. Formidable military power will not bring peace. The starting point for bringing about peace is the family. When I first arrived in America in 1971, the wind of promiscuous free sex was blowing across the country, and the entire society was in the midst of confusion. Young people who had received wonderful educations were being destroyed one by one. Sexual immorality was so bad that it was becoming the norm. Sexually transmitted diseases were beginning to skyrocket. The seriousness of the problem was compounded by politicians, academics, and clergy. They knew about this problem, but most of them ignored it. They tried to look away from the ugly reality because they themselves had not maintained sexual purity. People who are not sexually pure themselves cannot force their children to be so. The degradation of sexual morality among adults destroys families and leads to the ruin of children. Immorality and licentiousness in the personal lives of adults ultimately destroy the lives of their children. The reason today's society does not have a level of happiness to match its level of material affluence is that families are being destroyed. To save families, adults must first live proper lives. Then, it is possible to raise children in sexual purity. The mother is the fortress that protects the family. No matter how much society may change, the family can stand as a healthy and peaceful family only if the mother has the heart to sacrifice and serve. It is in such a family that beautiful children can grow. In educating our children, what the children see and learn in the family is most important. A crab that walks sideways cannot tell its offspring to walk straight ahead. The parents must show a good example. True children come from true families. Truth is always very simple. The most difficult aspect of family life is raising children properly. We give birth to them in love and raise them in love, but they don't necessarily grow up the way their parents desire. What's worse, today's materialistic civilization is destroying the innocent minds of young people. Young people who should be growing up to become responsible adults capable of extraordinary things are being lost to drugs. Drug-induced states make people lose touch with their own spirit. Young people who have lost their spirits eventually can only fall into crime and sexual immorality. During adolescence, children think everything should be centered only on themselves, and so there is the tendency to rebel against things the parents may say. If the parent does not respond with understanding, there is the possibility that the child may go to self-centered extremes. On the other hand, a child in adolescence can be deeply moved by anything that seems to connect with his heart. Perhaps on an autumn day, the child will see a persimmon fall from a tree that has lost all its leaves. The child cannot explain it, but somehow it connects with his heart and he will smile and experience happiness. This is a sign that God's original character is dwelling in his heart. But if children are caught up in the emotions of love during adolescence, their perceptions can be clouded and their power of judgment diminished. When an adolescent boy and girl meet and start talking with each other, they can feel flushed and there may be a change in their heart rate. If their minds are not brought into harmony with God's standard in that moment, they will surely be moved in the direction of self-centeredness. They lose the means with which to control their bodies. During adolescence, our cells open wide all the doors of love in both the physical body and the spirit. The desires of our mind and the desires of our body are meant to become one and function together. When we acquire the nose of love, we start to love smells that we used to hate. When we acquire the mouth of love, we start to love tastes that we used to hate. We want to listen all night to the stories of love. We want to keep touching the person we love. Adolescents start to think they can be happy simply by entering into a love relationship. However, the doors of love are designed by God and are to open only when the time is right. Children must understand that they need to wait for the right time. Parents must teach these things to their adolescent children very carefully. Love is a process by which we grow to resemble God. Despite what the world may tell us, it is not something to be enjoyed anytime we please. During adolescence, a child may want to try really hard to copy the activity in a thrilling movie. People ask, what's wrong with that? It is wrong because irresponsible actions lead to destruction. When children mature and acquire wisdom and knowledge, they can control their social and environmental experiences and are truly free to do so, but not during adolescence. Why do we say, do not give a knife to a child? It is because the child would wave it around. The child might understand how to cut with a knife, but he cuts without control. The child might even cut his mother's fingers. Because children do not yet fully understand consequences, we do not give them knives. The combination of parents not teaching their children the value of purity and children rebelling against their parents leads to broken families. Because of this, societies are being broken. Because of this, nations are being destroyed. Because of this, humanity is being destroyed.